Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of What Happened. Today we're diving into one of the most watched, most memed, and most controversial trials of the 21st century. A story that turned a Virginia courtroom into the world's biggest reality TV show and made everyone from your grandmother to random TikTokers into legal experts overnight. This is the story of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, and I guarantee you, even if you think you know what happened, there's so much more to this story than the viral clips and memes you saw. But before we get into the chaos, let's rewind and start from the beginning. Because this whole saga begins not with a lawsuit, but with a movie set, a romance, and what would become one of Hollywood's most toxic relationships. It's 2009, and Johnny Depp is filming The Rum Diary based on a Hunter S. Thompson novel. At this point, Depp was still riding high on the massive success of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He was with long-term partner Vanessa Paradis, and he was basically living his best life as one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. Enter Amber Heard, a relatively unknown actress cast as the love interest in the film. She was young, ambitious, and about to become entangled in what would eventually become one of the most publicized relationships in Hollywood history. Now they didn't start dating immediately. Depp was still with Vanessa Paradis, his partner of 14 years and mother of his 2 children. But something was brewing on that set. And by 2012, after Depp and Paradis had split, he and Heard went public with their relationship. The age gap was significant. Depp was 49, Heard was 26, but in Hollywood, that's unfortunately pretty standard. Their relationship moved fast. Like, really fast. By 2014, they were engaged, and in February 2015, they had a private wedding ceremony in the Bahamas. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale, the established Hollywood legend and the rising starlet. But behind closed doors, according to both of their later testimonies, things were already falling apart. The first major red flag that the public saw was actually kind of ridiculous in hindsight. They got in trouble for smuggling their dogs into Australia. Yeah, you heard that right. In 2015, they brought their Yorkshire Terriers, Pistol and Boo, into Australia without following proper quarantine procedures, which is a big deal down under because of their strict biosecurity laws. They had to make this incredibly awkward apology video that went viral for all the wrong reasons. It seems silly now, but it was actually a preview of how every aspect of their relationship would eventually play out in the public eye. But the real drama started in May 2016, just 15 months after their wedding, when Heard filed for divorce. And this wasn't just any divorce filing, she also requested a temporary restraining order against Depp, claiming he had been physically abusive. She appeared in court with what appeared to be bruising on her face. And suddenly, Johnny Depp, Captain Jack Sparrow himself, was being accused of domestic violence. Depp denied everything. His representatives called the allegations salacious false stories, gossip, misinformation, and lies. But the damage was immediate. In Hollywood, even accusations can end careers, and Depp started feeling the consequences almost right away. The divorce was finalized in January 2017, and for a while, it seemed like both parties were trying to move on. They released a joint statement saying their relationship had been intensely passionate and at times volatile, but always bound by love. It seemed diplomatic, mature even, but that peace wouldn't last. In December 2018, Amber Heard published an op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change." Now, here's the thing. She never mentioned Johnny Depp by name in this article. Not once, but she described herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse and wrote about becoming a target for speaking out against sexual violence. The timeline clearly pointed to her relationship with Depp, and everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. For Depp, this op-ed was the final straw. By 2018, his career was already in shambles. Disney had dropped him from future Pirates of the Caribbean films, a franchise that had made him hundreds of millions of dollars. Warner Brothers had asked him to resign from the Fantastic Beasts series. His reputation was in ruins, and he blamed Heard's allegations for all of it. So, in March 2019, Depp decided to fight back. He sued Amber Heard for defamation, seeking $50 million in damages. His legal team argued that Heard had orchestrated an elaborate hoax to destroy his career and reputation. They claimed she had manipulated photos, lied about injuries, and essentially concocted an entire narrative of abuse that never happened. Heard wasn't about to back down. She filed a countersuit for $100 million, claiming that Depp's legal team had defamed her by calling her allegations a hoax. She maintained that everything she had said about the abuse was true, and that Depp was trying to further victimize her through the legal system. But before we get to the main event in Virginia, we need to talk about what happened in the UK, because Depp actually tried this strategy before, and it backfired spectacularly. In 2019, Depp sued the Sun newspaper in London over an article that called him a wife-beater. He figured if he could win that case, it would vindicate him and prove Heard was lying. The trial lasted 16 days in the summer of 2020, and it was brutal. Heard testified about 14 separate instances of alleged abuse, providing detailed accounts of violence, drug use, and psychological torment. The judge, Andrew Nicole, ruled against Depp in November 2020. He found that 12 of the 14 abuse allegations were substantially true, and that the Sun was justified in calling Depp a wife-beater. The judgment was devastating. It essentially meant that a British court had found that Depp had indeed abused Heard. Within days of that ruling, Depp was dropped from the Fantastic Beasts franchise. His career seemed to be over. But instead of accepting defeat, Depp's team decided to try again, this time in Virginia, where the laws were different and they thought they had a better chance. And that brings us to April 11th, 2022, and the beginning of what would become known as the trial of the century. Though, let's be honest, we seem to have a lot of those these days. The Fairfax County Courthouse in Virginia became ground zero for what can only be described as a media circus. Fans, mostly Depp supporters, camped outside the courthouse, some in costume, treating it like a movie premiere rather than a serious legal proceeding. The trial was live-streamed, which was unusual for a civil case, and suddenly everyone with an internet connection became a legal expert. When Depp took the stand on April 19th, it was appointment television. Here was Captain Jack Sparrow, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, speaking in his characteristic, mumbling delivery about his childhood trauma, his relationship with Heard, and his struggles with addiction. He painted himself as the victim of an abusive relationship, claiming that Heard would instigate fights and escalate arguments. The most shocking moment of his testimony came when he described an incident in Australia in 2015. According to Depp, during a heated argument, Heard threw a vodka bottle at him that shattered and severed the tip of his finger. But here's where it gets really dark. After the injury, Depp used his bleeding finger to write messages on the walls and mirrors of their rental house. He admitted to writing things in his own blood, which is honestly one of the most disturbing details in this entire case. But Depp's testimony wasn't all sympathetic. Heard's lawyers presented text messages he had sent to friends, including one where he talked about Heard's rotting corpse, and another where he discussed wanting to burn her and drown her. These texts revealed a level of anger and vitriol that was genuinely scary to read. When Heard took the stand on May 4th, the tone shifted completely. She broke down almost immediately, saying, "I struggle to find the words to describe how painful this is. This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through, for sure." Her testimony was graphic and disturbing. She described instances of sexual violence, physical abuse, and psychological torment. She claimed Depp would go on drug and alcohol binges that would turn him into a monster she called the Monster. She described him searching her for drugs by performing cavity searches, hitting her, throwing objects, and creating an atmosphere of terror in their home. But here's where the trial took a bizarre turn. The internet had already made up its mind about who to believe, and it wasn't Amber Heard. The trial became the world's first trial by TikTok. Clips of testimony were edited into memes, reaction videos, and comedy sketches. The hashtag #NardJusticeForJohnnyDepp gained nearly 7 billion views on TikTok. Meanwhile, hashtags supporting Heard barely registered. The memeification of the trial was honestly pretty disturbing to watch. Serious allegations of domestic violence and sexual assault were being turned into entertainment. People were making fun of Heard's tears, creating viral dances to audio clips of her testimony, and treating the whole thing like a reality TV show rather than a legal proceeding about very serious allegations. Part of this was definitely due to the difference in their fan bases. Depp had decades of beloved film roles and a carefully cultivated public persona as the quirky, lovable outsider. Heard, while successful, didn't have that same level of public affection or parasocial relationship with audiences. When people had to choose sides, they chose the guy they'd grown up watching in movies. But the social media reaction also revealed something darker about how we treat women who make abuse allegations. Heard was subjected to an incredible amount of online harassment, death threats, and mockery. Every facial expression, every tear, every word was dissected and ridiculed. It became socially acceptable, even encouraged, to attack a woman who claimed she was a victim of domestic violence. The testimony phase of the trial lasted 6 weeks, and it was exhausting for everyone involved. Both sides presented evidence of drug use, violent incidents, and emotional manipulation. Audio recordings were played where you could hear both Depp and Heard saying terrible things to each other. It painted a picture of a relationship that was toxic from both sides, but the question was whether that toxicity had crossed the line into criminal abuse. Depp's legal team, led by Camille Vasquez, presented their case with the precision of a military operation. They argued that Heard was a manipulative liar who had fabricated evidence and coached witnesses. They pointed to inconsistencies in her story, questioned why she didn't seek medical treatment for alleged injuries, and suggested she was the real abuser in the relationship. Heard's team, meanwhile, tried to focus on the pattern of abuse and the power dynamic in the relationship. They brought in expert witnesses to explain why victims of domestic violence might not behave in ways that seem logical to outside observers. They argued that even if Heard wasn't a perfect victim, that didn't mean she wasn't a victim at all. On June 1st, 2022, after nearly 2 days of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict, and it was a decisive victory for Johnny Depp. The jury found that Heard had defamed Depp in her Washington Post op-ed, even though she never mentioned him by name. They awarded him $10.4 million in damages, not quite the $50 million he'd asked for, but still a substantial sum. In a small victory for Heard, the jury also found that one of Depp's lawyers had defamed her by calling her allegations a hoax, awarding her $2 million. Depp wasn't even in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He was performing with Jeff Beck in the UK, having apparently been confident enough in the outcome to skip the most important moment of the trial. He released a statement saying the jury had given him his life back and that he felt at peace knowing I have finally accomplished that. Heard, meanwhile, looked devastated as the verdict was read. In her statement, she said, "The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. But the real victory for Depp wasn't just in the courtroom, it was in the court of public opinion. Social media exploded with celebrations from his supporters, memes declaring victory, and a general sense that justice had been served. For many people, this felt like a correction to the Not Me Too movement, proof that false accusations could be exposed and that men could be victims too. However, the aftermath of the trial has been complicated for both parties. Depp did see some career rehabilitation. He returned to the Cannes Film Festival, got a standing ovation, and started getting some work again. But he hasn't returned to the level of superstardom he enjoyed before. The big franchise roles haven't come back, and while he won the legal battle, the war for his reputation is ongoing. Heard, on the other hand, has largely disappeared from public life. She moved to Spain with her daughter, staying out of the spotlight and away from the continued harassment she faced online. Her career has essentially been destroyed, and while some supporters argue she was the victim of a massive online campaign of misogyny, the public has largely moved on from her story. The trial also had broader implications for how we think about domestic violence, celebrity culture, and the power of social media. Legal experts have worried that the outcome might discourage other abuse victims from coming forward, fearing they'll face the same level of public scrutiny and online harassment that Heard endured. On the flip side, supporters of Depp argue that the case showed that men can be victims of abuse too, and that false accusations can destroy lives and careers. They point to the evidence presented at trial and argue that justice was served. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the whole saga was how it was turned into entertainment. The fact that serious allegations of domestic violence and sexual assault became content for TikTok memes and Twitter jokes reveals something deeply troubling about our culture. We turned a courtroom into a coliseum, and we all became spectators cheering for blood. The trial also demonstrated the incredible power of social media to shape public opinion in real time. While traditional media tried to maintain some semblance of objectivity, social media platforms became echo chambers where people could consume only the content that confirmed their existing biases. If you wanted to believe Depp, you could find endless content supporting that view. If you wanted to believe Heard, you could find that too, though it was much less common and much less viral. The phenomenon of the trial by TikTok has implications that extend far beyond this case. It shows how our justice system can be influenced by public opinion in the age of social media, and how the loudest voices online don't necessarily represent the most informed or fair-minded perspectives. Looking back now, more than 2 years after the verdict, it's hard to know what to make of the whole spectacle. Both Depp and Heard were clearly in a toxic relationship that brought out the worst in both of them. Whether that toxicity crossed the line into criminal abuse is something that different people will continue to interpret differently, regardless of what any jury decided. What's undeniable is that the trial changed both of their lives forever. It also changed how we think about celebrity, social media, and the intersection of entertainment and justice. It showed us that in the digital age, public opinion can be just as powerful as any court ruling. Maybe more so. The Johnny Depp vs. Amber Heard case wasn't just a defamation trial. It was a mirror held up to our society, reflecting our biases, our cruelties, and our appetite for turning real human suffering into entertainment. Whether you think justice was served or a miscarriage of justice occurred, one thing is clear. This case will be studied for years to come as a defining moment in how social media, celebrity culture, and the legal system intersect in the modern world. And that's what happened to Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, a story that started with a Hollywood romance and ended with a legal spectacle that captivated the world, destroyed careers, and left us all asking difficult questions about truth, justice, and what we're willing to believe. That's it for this episode of What Happened. What do you guys think about the whole Depp versus Heard saga? Do you think the right verdict was reached? And what does this case say about how social media influences our perception of justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But please keep it respectful, because these are real people's lives we're talking about. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that defined our culture. I'll catch you guys in the next one.